Hi everyone, good morning and welcome. It's really nice to see so many familiar faces and familiar names. Those of you who don't know me, I'm Rebecca, I'm Head of Sales at Shireburn, and I'm joined today with Mikela, our HR expert.
Good morning. As you can see, we've started gearing up for Christmas. We never
Christmas.
wear red, but today we decided both of us to wear red. So this is quite. But I thought, this is Christmas. I love Hallmark, and we're here to bring you some good cheer this morning.
As many of you are probably aware, 2024, this year, we've launched a number of new HR products. And we've got Indigo Hiring, our new applicant tracking system. We've got Indigo Performance, which is a comprehensive platform for you to carry out performance reviews and keep track of objectives and key results. We've also launched Indigo Benchmarks for salary benchmarking. And the first one we did launch, which is where we're going back to today, is Indigo HR Advantage, which was previously known as Indigo People Plus. So some of you might know it by that name. This module gives you access to task management, keeping track of skills and training of your team, as well as Indigo Insights, which is a very powerful Power BI dashboard. However, the aim today is not to actually concentrate on the product, but to take a step back and discuss really the essentials of what any HR team needs to build an impactful HR department that works for you and your company. So we will be touching briefly about how Indigo HR Advantage can help you achieve these goals. Mikela will be giving her insight from her experience. Before we dive in, I'm just going to go through some housekeeping. So basically, if all the mics and the webcams will be kept off for all the participants. If you'd like to ask a question, on your left-hand side, you will see a tab called Questions. Please pop them in there and we'll answer them towards the end of the session. If you would like to receive further information about any of the modules we've mentioned just now or Indigo HR Advantage, there will be a poll at the end where you would be able to register your interest, and the sales team will reach out to you to set a demo and be able to so we can show you the product and give you a quote accordingly. For those of you who don't know, Mikela actually started out her career in diplomacy and then moved into an HR department with one of the Big Four. Originally in a project management role, which kickstarted her HR career. She then went on to restructure HR departments in several industries, and now does so in her capacity as an HR consultant. So, Mikela, take us back to the start. The first days of the job. Where did you start from?
To be honest, I'm not even sure I knew HR existed as like a profession when I was a diplomat. So. For those that know me, I'm not the most diplomatic of people, let's say, but my diplomatic skills came in great use in the HR department. And when I did start out on my HR career, I never studied for HR, so I never went to any courses on HR. And I remember myself looking at it from a completely different perspective and saying, okay, what do I need? So when Becky said, let's do something on, the fundamentals of HR, I thought, let's go back to the very, very, very beginning of how I started and what did I look at first instance. So at first instance in an HR department, for me, what was the most important was developing trust. Now, this is something that most people don't generally give a lot of attention to, developing trust. This is like when you're in a kitchen and you need to clean up the kitchen before you start cooking. It's a really crazy idea, but I generally never cook. I don't cook a lot, but when I cook, I first have to clean the kitchen and then I start cooking. And in an HR department, it's very, very, very similar. You don't start cooking, you don't start building an HR department before you clean up the HR department. But before you clean up the HR department, there's a very, very important aspect, which is trust. And trust is something that you can't buy, and it's something that you can't make, and it's something that comes with time. But basically, it is starting to build those relationships, which then will serve you in good stead later on. We'll speak a little bit more about trust a little bit later, but that's the first thing. Trust, and making sure that trust means showing that you're competent and also making sure that whatever you promise you deliver. So that you are reliable. Competency and reliability is important. You don't need to know everything and you don't need to deliver everything, but at least be honest about it. So that's how you start building trust. Before that, however, as well, with trust, is looking at the department as a whole and saying, okay, let's first clean it up. The first is integrity of data. That's where I started from. So I thought, let's look at our data. At the time, I was really frustrated because the systems we were using were very old. They were systems that came from overseas, and they were not systems that I liked. But I had to, in a sense, do the job with the systems that I had. But more importantly, what really made me think is garbage in, garbage out. In fact, I think I wanted to call this webinar, garbage in, garbage out, because really HR is about that. It's garbage in, garbage out. If you do not have the integrity of your data intact, then it's really difficult to be able to use the data to your full advantage. And what am I saying? Take COVID, for example. In COVID, one of the most important things that we learned was that it's our payroll data that is the most accurate. Irrespective of whichever HR information system I used, it was payroll data that I went back to. And I thought to myself, why am I relying on payroll data? Why does payroll data give me peace of mind? Because payroll data is the data that is the most up to date. Because if it's not, your staff are going to tell you. If it's not, then your salaries don't go out. So there's a huge benefit of looking at that. Then it is looking at how many cooks and how many hands are touching this data. So processes internally to be able to understand who's touching the data. The more hands touch the data, the more times the data is moved from one system to the next, the less integrity of data you have. Which means that at the end of the day, when we come to talk about insights and when we come to talk about our statistics, which are crucial to taking decisions, how are we going to actually walk into a boardroom and know for a fact that the data that we're presenting is good data? Difficult. I was never convinced about my data. So in a sense, I lacked the confidence to be able to put these numbers forward. As well, I had the challenge of numbers. I'm not a numbers person. I feel very challenged by numbers. I get a nick, a rash when I look at numbers because I'm convinced myself over the years that I can't understand them. And therefore, if I look at a formula, I blank. Luckily, we have insights on Indigo Advantage that gives us pretty much everything. But that is where I would start. Literally the very, very basics. The name, the addresses, the probation date, for example. In most companies, one of the biggest challenges is probation dates. They're not entered into the system. We don't know why. Because at the end of the day, probation is there for a reason. It's a really important date. One needs to understand what it's there for. It's there for you to be able to assess the members of staff, for members of staff to understand if they're happy. If you miss probation date, the trouble comes after that if you don't assess probation. Another aspect is sick leave, for example. Sick leave and leave. I don't think I have ever been into a company where they didn't have a challenge with sick leave or with leave, unutilized leave. In the last couple of years, it's become quite, not really a trend, but it quite an important factor to ask members of staff to transfer only 5 days of leave. 5-10 years ago, you didn't have this. But most now companies are looking to a situation where they encourage people to take their leave and then move it on. COVID only exacerbated the problem. Why are you going to take leave to stare at the wall or to watch another Netflix movie when you're not going out and you're never doing anything? So leave is a big expense. So from the outset, my take when it comes to building an HR department, if an HR department wants to be relevant, is that an HR department needs to be built around good data, very, very rich in decision-making potential and information that it gives you. So good and integral data, but also giving a platform to the HR professionals to be able to use that data to their advantage, to be able to uplift the department to a strategic role. So in the past, HR was looked at very much as administration, just keeping the books, payroll, working with staff on their little day-to-days, and managing the leave. Today, the leave is an expense. It shows up in the bottom line. It is a strategic advantage if you have an HR department that is able to manage leave and manage leave effectively. I mean, I walked into one of the first organizations I worked with, people had hundreds of hours of leave. Hundreds. It was insane. If I calculated it, the cost of that leave is huge, and we don't generally see it. So people drive organizations, but they have a lot of benefits that cost a lot of money. And there are a lot of benefits we don't look at, then we don't actually summate, if you know what I mean, and calculate.
Nick, I mean, this is something that has driven us, right, in developing these HR tools. Having too many sources for your data makes everything even more complicated. So, I mean, we're very well known for our payroll and attendance management in the market, but we wanted to become, which we are doing quite successfully, the go-to place for everything to do with people management, including HR, so that you end up with one source of data for all your HR function and payroll function too. And I think that's quite important as well, because the more different data sources you have, the more likely you are to miss updating somewhere, which then causes misunderstanding of the data, because it is, like you said, garbage in, garbage out. Did you have any of this experience where you had a lot of...
Everywhere I went, I had Excel sheets. So I was used to Word. I'm a Word person. I like Word. If you see, whenever I send Becky numbers, I always put them in a table in Word because I don't know how to use Excel. So every time people gave me Excel sheets, I again come out in a rash. And they used to drive me nuts because we'd have an Excel sheet for performance, an Excel sheet for leave, an Excel sheet for sick leave. And every time someone was onboarded or offboarded, the Excel sheet becomes redundant, because you need to keep updating, and each time you update different Excel sheets. I used to call it death by Excel sheets. And so my aim was always introduce systems to be able to eliminate all Excel sheets, and I managed to do that. As I went along and as I grew in HR and I understood HR more and more, the more you grow, the more industries you see, the more you understand HR, then that's exactly what my main aim was: eliminate Excel sheets. To be able to have everything on one system, the systems talking to each other, that at the end of the day, as much as possible, the least intervention from your end. So if you have an applicant tracking system, you issue a vacancy announcement, members of the public apply for the vacancy, they key in their key information so they know it's correct. You don't have to double check it. And all of a sudden, there is no interference from human hands. The minute you start having people touching your system is the minute you become a little less confident in the data on your system. And then all of a sudden it becomes problematic. All it takes is one mistake. And rest assured, when you present numbers to a board of director, a lot of them will be numbers people, they will find that hair. They will find the mistake. And all of a sudden, that one small mistake will question the integrity of your data across. So I think that is the first. It's making sure that what HR presents is reliable, what HR presents is a reflection of what's going on, and also that you keep in mind that HR is not just there to administer, HR is there to actually drive the business and drive savings for the business. And when I say savings, if we're looking at, for example, things like insights, you will be able to see them immediately. You'll be able to see savings. They pop up like red flags. You have sick leave, you have leave, extremely expensive. You have attrition rate, which is the turnover rate and how many people are leaving the company. That is also very expensive. And also you have things like overtime. Immediately, if you look at the Insights platform, immediately you'll notice, oh my God, that individual is being favored when it comes to overtime. This one's getting too many compensations and benefits. Why? What's happening? Not only there, but also when it comes to hours. We have a habit of accommodating people, of taking decisions on a whim. Someone goes out on parental leave or paternity leave or maternity leave, and all of a sudden we say, we really need you, come back on reduced hours, come back on flexi week. And after 2-3 years, we've forgotten that we've given this arrangement, but we don't realize how much that is costing the company, if it is costing the company. So we very rarely make these analyses because it's generally very time consuming to calculate this data. So I used to try and calculate the data, and then someone walks in with a crisis, you're overtaken by a crisis, you go back to your Excel sheet, and I forget what I was doing and have to start from scratch and remind myself. In this situation, you're able to see everything on a screen, you're able to see and pinpoint. So that's the first thing I would do, integrity of data. The second that I would do are policies, the look of policies. So in today's HR functions, it is really important that you have good quality policies. First of all, it's a law that you have policies. Now, luckily today you have places like the FHRD that organize the quality mark, for example, which guides you as to the different pillars of HR that are able to give you the policies. But even if you don't want to embark on that process, which is a very useful process to do, and they know what they're doing, is also to just use the internet. So when I said at the beginning that I knew nothing about HR, I did have to learn about HR. And today at our disposal, we have tools beyond belief. So one little quick trick that I generally use is, for example, going into Google search or a search engine, randomly, for example, putting something HR function, pillars of HR, and going into the image section. If you go into the image section, you'll find loads of different images with different ways of presenting the different pillars of HR. You can't really get confused because there are the same standard pillars. So you have the first is your administration. That's where I would start from. Administration and making sure that the repetitive tasks are automated and that they're good. If your repetitive tasks are automated, everything becomes much simpler. This week I went to a seminar on the use of AI in HR, for example, artificial intelligence and the use of chatbots, and how we are able to use AI to our advantage if we know what we're doing, to be able to eliminate a lot of this repetitive stuff, tasks. The second would be a look at creating an HR which is self-service.
In fact, that's where I was going to come, because you're mentioning all of these policies. Obviously, the team needs to know what the policies are.
Yes.
But beyond that, you mentioned the leave. We know when we meet our clients and HR departments, like, we know what an administrative burden it can be. People coming to the HR team, asking them for their leave balance, asking them for they're going to apply for a home loan, asking for their FS3 and their last 3 pay slips because they misplaced them, which is something we've had from day one. We have the Indigo employee portal, which can give access to all your employees. They can log in, they can see their leave balances, they can apply for leave. There's so much functionality you can give them from a self-service, including the uploading of documents. And I think that is really powerful for an HR team, because it allows you to release yourself from certain day-to-day questions and move into actually being with the people and understanding the pulse of the team.
Okay, here you touch on something that is really important. I think the rule of thumb is, what kind of culture has we joined? As an HR function, what culture does the organization have? You will find that there are different cultures. There are cultures that are very, very open to change. They're not in the majority. Then there are cultures that are, for example, very secretive cultures, where salaries are hidden, where, for example, leave needs to be controlled, where leave is given only if you ask HR and then they write it on a piece of paper and hand it to you, or you have to ask for an email. So the first thing is to do an audit of the culture. What kind of environment are you functioning in? And where do you want to get to? And then look at what I call the absorption rate. I think one of the biggest mistakes that I've made in every single organization I worked in, this is shame on me to be fair, is that the pace of my change is much faster than the pace of the change of the organization. So I missed out on a really important step, which was understanding what I would call the absorption rate. So any organization is like a sponge. There is a sponge this size and you can chuck it into water. There is an absorption rate until the sponge starts leaking. Now, organizations are like that. How fast can you implement change? And we can complain and we can yap about the fact that our CEO is not open to change, or our finance director is not open to change, or people are blocking you. This is all stuff you will find in HR, because any change will bring about shifts. Any change will bring about shifts in balance of power. It will bring about shifts in people politics. It will bring about shifts in transparency. Mm-hmm. So shifts in transparency are really, really interesting. You'd think we want to live in organizations that are very, very transparent. Yet, I've been in organizations where the salaries of managers were hidden from me. I couldn't have access to the salary of managers, because it was assumed that it was, top secret to cover management, not realizing that in today's world, staff talk. So assume that people are all going to know what salaries people are getting. If there are bonuses, everyone is going to know. So one has to assume that. So the drive towards working transparently leads also to safer and more authentic and much happier workplaces. But the courage needed to take this journey is very difficult. And of course, systems like this help. We also, of course, recognize that not every company and every administration of each company is ready for this sort of level of transparency. So our systems and the systems that they have built work well with switching off and closing areas should you wish. This is important because it will take time. Things take time to change. So my recommendation is always, whenever I started working in HR departments, and I do it till today, I believe it or not, have an Excel sheet called my strategy sheet, which is basically the pillars of HR. So you would have, for example, administration, recruitment, retention, strategy, and training and development. Those are my 5 pillars of HR. Under each, there are different things. So at the beginning, my administration was, for example, things like GDPR, and leave, sick leave, making sure the basics, the very, very, very basics are properly done. And then you look at your recruitment system, and then you will look at your retention system. So today, for example, there was a long time where we thought, giving apples and bananas were enough, or offering breakfast to our staff were enough to retain staff. Today we are much, much wiser. We know that staff will remain if they are happy and feel safe in an organization. And then that's what leads to performance. But today we're not going to be talking about performance. But that is learning and development. Under training and learning and development, you would have things like performance. But ultimately, each and every step will lead you to what the main aim of HR should be, which is strategic HR. How can the HR function serve the business to the best of its abilities, to be able to give the best of its people and supports the growth of the company? That is when you become relevant in HR. And the onus of that is HR's. So most people at the top do not understand the power that HR can drive. So we would like to assist you with these systems to be able to give you a platform and eliminate all the stuff that is repetitive and takes a lot of time for you to be able to do the bigger stuff using the data as a driver for your decisions. Yes?
Yeah. Like continuing a bit about it touches upon this self-service functionality, but you earlier mentioned also the repetitive tasks, right, that HR face. And one of the modules we do have within Indigo HR Advantage is this task, we call it task management. It started originally as being able to automatically assign onboarding and offboarding tasks, but we saw that the real power behind it and continue to build on it. So now you can create any type of task, including organizing the Christmas party, since we're in the festive spirit. The HR departments tend to have all these tasks as part of their process, which aren't necessarily their responsibility, but they end up chasing the relevant key members of staff to complete them. It can go from the IT team asking you to create tickets to do what they need to do for the onboarding or offboarding, to chasing the hiring manager to make sure the training plan is in place, etc. So how important do you think that is? So basically our system allows them to send the tasks through the employee portal. Each employee can see tasks assigned to them, including anyone who's new joining the team. So you can give them access to...
You're making me smile because I'm remembering my computer when I was running HR departments was always full of these yellow, at the time we only had yellow post-it notes all the way around with reminder to this, reminder to this, reminder. That was my task list. And or else I had my diaries. So I am one of these very ancient people that still write things down. Until I met one of the HR managers that I mentored that thinks I'm a troglodyte and has introduced me to sticky notes on my computer. Now I keep everything on sticky notes. But my to-do lists are always, I forget that I do to-do lists. This is the problem. I write them and then I forget them and then I go back to them and then I forget them again. So, because your day is taken up. So tasks are crucial. Because what tasks list do is it doesn't just have a list, but what it does is that the list actually links. So it sends emails out and it reminds people and it does it for you. And this is really important, not just for the HR function to remember, but also because my take has always been our job as HR professionals is to make sure that if we leave, then the HR function can still function without us. So you are as good as what you leave behind. Now, this is difficult. It's difficult on our egos. It's difficult because we think we can do it best. It's true, probably. But the truth is, if we really want to leave a legacy of succession is crucial in any HR department. And that's why IT systems are great. IT systems give organizations the opportunity to leave a good legacy. And a good legacy means that if I fall sick, God forbid, tomorrow, and I disappear from the scene for a couple of months, the function can still go on. We don't have to remember, Mikela used to do this, or maybe she forgot to tell us that, or maybe this, or, what happened about that probation? No. So if you're looking at probation, then you know the start date, the probation is 6 months or 1 year, depending on the contract. It's in the system. The system will remind you, mid-probation review, for example, you say we're going to have a mid-probation review, and we're going to have an end-of-probation review. By the mid-probation review, if you have the right system in place, and today on Indigo platform, you can actually do this because you can have a probation review assessment under the performance side. Then it kickstarts immediately, sends off the questions immediately, and you're asking the right questions. You're not leaving the questions to a manager who maybe in the middle of their day has to think of their people issues and may not be trained properly. You're guiding them as HR. So you become consultants. So HR need to be there as a supportive function, as consultants, not to do the dirty work, but to be very, very supportive, to help, to aid managers to be able to work in the right way, to create safety. So, and if it's probation, then it does. But if I then go out on sick leave or I decide to resign tomorrow, then we haven't missed 5 probations because, Mikela used to keep the list of probations in some Excel sheet in her computer, and she's formatted the computer or left without telling us, or we don't know where it is, or we can't understand the process that she used to use, then everything falls by the wayside. This way, what you're doing is you're making sure that the systems that you set up are there and are functioning according to a standard operating procedure that has a function. I also used to do what I call the idiot's guide to HR. Every process I would document. So I would have a Word document, of course, and everything was Word documented. And every process I had was documented to be able to say, this is the reason why we're doing this, etc. Why do I say this? Because, there are many processes in HR that are legacy processes. They come from way back, and we never question them. We absolutely never question them. And this is the biggest difficulty. When we don't question, we don't learn, and we don't grow. Yesterday I was in a lecture at university, and my co-lecturer came up with this really interesting example, which I will repeat with his permission. So thank you, Marco, for this. But basically, he said he was working with an organization that at one moment, once a month, he used to walk into the orders department. This is a while back, before computers and systems were actually up and running. And what he noticed is that they used to print. So it was a call center, and every day they used to print 200 pages of call center possible questions to ask. 200 pages, that costs a lot of money. When all it would have taken was to question the motivation for these 200 pages. And then what he did within a month was actually transform those 200 pages into an Excel sheet that was sent once a day. And you still had the data and you still had the information. But because it was always done like that, we always did it like that. So when I join HR department, I make sure to be curious and ask. And I would go all to the elders and say, what's this policy? Why was it implemented? What was the reason? Very often in HR, because we mentioned policies, and policies are crucial, but very often, let's be very, very careful with policies. We have a tendency to solve problems of 1 or 2 individuals by creating a sweeping policy. Okay? A complete sweeping policy. We decide, okay, so there are 2 individuals that are abusing of overtime, therefore everybody gets the blame. Because we don't have the safety net or the training to be able to deal with these 2 individuals. It happens in laws. You see recently with some of the budgetary measures, for example, we see the same thing. Instead of zoning in on, a few people that need to be worked upon and maybe trained and maybe upskilled, we say, okay, everybody. This is, for example, the same when you come to stop leave, for example. Because some people abuse of, for example, the Christmas period and you just have fun at work, which, by the way, I love to do. It was my favorite time of year to go to work because you build relationships you don't build otherwise. Then let's put stop leave all through Christmas because you don't get too much work done during stop leave. So one has to look at the motivation behind the policy before the policy. And that is important because you get buy-in. Automatically you get buy-in if the motivation is authentic and if it's driven by a genuine need. Because you might have, in Maltese we have a beautiful expression, mal hazin yahed tayyib. So with people that are abusing of the system, those that are not abusing have to also comply with policies sometimes that very often don't make sense. So this is why I asked you to go through the FHRD process, because it gives you the main policies that you legally are required to have. And so you'd have sexual harassment policy, this sort of stuff, and more importantly, a reporting policy. So I thought one of the things I've learned most, Bex, in HR is that one of the most crucial things to have in a company is a reporting process. How do staff report abuse? How do staff report bullying? How do staff report sexual harassment? What is the process? And it's very, very, very challenging. The tighter you have that process, the easier it will be when it comes to administering the disciplinary process. Because that then attaches to a lot of policies that you have. And you can really attach it to anything,
Okay. Maybe moving on a bit topic-wise, I believe that when we speak to our customers, another key understanding out there is truly understanding the skills of your team as well, to be able to get the most out of them. We earlier this year we hosted the Happiness Advantage, and one of the key themes in it was like understanding the spark of each of your employees, what makes them excel, what makes them above the rest. So how important do you think this type of understanding is, and how can it drive the HR department as well to continue to take their HR department up to the next level?
So honestly, I wish I had the easy solution to skills and training, especially in an HR department. But the truth is, I don't. And I wish I had a magic wand to be able to say, look, everybody is good at what I need them to be good at, but the truth is, I don't. So the understanding is, for me, it has always been relatively simple to understand the type of personality I needed for the job. So, for example, if I had someone who was going to be doing predominantly administration and data inputting, I needed someone who was attentive to detail. So I didn't need someone who was a genius, I just needed someone who was attentive to detail, who was going to not get bored on the job doing a specific task, right? And so that would definitely eliminate me, because I'm not very good at detail, I don't see mistakes, and I get very, very bored. So that would eliminate me. But understanding that when it comes to recruitment, for example, then I needed people that were good on the phone, that had people skills, that were able to negotiate with recruitment agencies, that were able to understand CVs, that had a bit of a vision, that understood these are not things that you find very easily, but what you can do is you can start training. And so what I always did in my HR departments is I always had a weekly meeting. I had my strategy, always. I would distribute the tasks. I would give KPIs to different people, but more than KPIs as in hard numbers, where we would like to get to. How's it going? Let's discuss the challenges that are coming our way. And also involved my HR in everything. So from the lowest grade to the highest grade in my teams, they were always exposed to absolutely everything that was going on in the HR department. We would discuss cases, if there were sexual harassment cases, if there were cases of bullying, which were the hardest, if there was abuse, we would sit, we would discuss, I would listen, because for me that was part of the training. So there was no hush-hush, but I had one very, very important rule. If anything goes out of this room, then you can get fired. So with HR, this is one of the most crucial things. Trust is crucial, but trust is also crucial amongst the team, right? So if you have, for example, HR, you expose your staff to a lot of numbers, very sensitive data, payroll data, extremely sensitive data. The minute, and you, as an HR professional, you become used to looking at numbers and ignoring them. If you have members in your team that look at numbers and question why their salary isn't up there, then they shouldn't be part of your HR team. So again, in HR, it's extremely important to have the personality. More than the skill set, it's the personality. How loyal are these individuals going to come in, look at payroll data, and use that data to their advantage? That for me is an absolute red line, but with a very, very, very thick red line, because that threatens the integrity of the department, and it becomes very, very problematic. Information that is discussed in HR, if it leaves that zone, again, the integrity of the department, because there's a lot of sensitive stuff that is discussed. If you want your team to grow, then the team needs to be involved in even the most difficult of cases. Maybe not all the details, but at least a lot of the details. I have had issues, but mostly I have found that when you trust people, they return that trust and they really flourish as HR individuals. And what they do is then they start contributing much, much more. So that is where the skills and trainings come in with HR, when it would be employment law, for example, crucial. There was yesterday, I believe, a very good employment conference by Rosalind. These are always very good organizations to follow. It's really important that we keep tabs on employment law and also understand how to interpret the law, because ultimately keep in mind that the employees will know the law better than you. I remember this one thing I could never remember. One of my sticky notes was always
notice periods.
Notice periods. I never remembered the notice periods. Hopefully we'll have a feature soon on our system that will actually pop up with this sort of information. This is where we're getting to. So you'll have that. But the important thing is that you trust your HR team and you look to developing them and also to developing ourselves. And also keep in mind the onus for the case of HR is on the HR department. So you cannot expect members of the board, governing bodies, executive teams, to understand exactly what HR faces every single day. You are the experts, you are the pros. If they are not understanding, then we need to change our way of communicating. Hence why we've developed these tools. So one of the reasons why I was so excited about salary benchmarks and insights, for example, is exactly this point. I needed tools to be able to be a wannabe finance manager. So if I knew if I walked in with powerful numbers, those numbers did the talking. If I had a toxic employee that I knew was a toxic employee, these would be your biggest challenges in HR, because they are the ones that keep you up at night. They are the ones that give you the biggest stress. They are the ones that put into question the HR department's integrity, because you fight for culture and you fight a very uncomfortable battles. So instead of putting yourselves out on the front line and exposing HR in that manner, then what you have is a situation where you can easily have these numbers speaking for themselves. Again, it's not HR's job to save the world. It's not HR's job to save the world. We tend to be more like Mother Teresa. We like to save the world, but at the end of the day, we need to find a balance with the business, a balance on absorption rates. Some people will understand quickly, Bex, some people will not. So it takes time.
I think the next step would then, like you mentioned, trying to be the finance manager side of things. So one thing we launched, which you mentioned, was Indigo Insights, which is part of the HR Advantage package. And it focuses on HR analytics pulled from your payroll data. So earlier we mentioned that payroll data is the most accurate data. It's not only checked by HR, but by the employee themselves as well when they receive their pay slips. So we launched Indigo Insights around a year ago now, and it now forms part of the HR Advantage package. And it allows you to see and analyze a lot of things, which allows an HR department to make strategic arguments more easily with the data to back them up. Maybe the first one we can touch upon is turnover rates, and why it's key to kind of understand the turnover trends within the company, if it's in a particular department, whether there are particular trends during the year. I mean, some trends might be seasonality. You have you're in an industry with high seasonality. In the peak seasons, obviously, headcount goes up and then goes down again. But what do you feel is like one of the key driving points to have that type of analytics as an HR department?
So I think probably because my bias was like I was allergic to numbers and I always thought I was terrible at maths. I never looked at analytics for a long time, only to realize that if I did not have analytics, I was not going to be taken seriously enough. So I think one of the biggest pet peeves for me when it came to launching Insights was, let's create a tool that gives HR a huge advantage strategically, that they're able to walk in with good data and the integrity of your data, because it's based on payroll data, so it can't be wrong. That you could actually not eliminate all those Excel sheets only, but also eliminate your PowerPoints, because you can just, bring it up and it's live from the night before, as payroll is with Shireburn, because that's, we reboot every night, and give you great insights. Now, when looking at the insights, the first thing you look at is generally, before you look at attrition, is the number of employees you have in an organization. The headcount and how many people you lost and you gained. So how many people you've hired, how many people you have, and how many people you've lost. And from there, you can start asking questions already. So if I look at my screen with insights, and many of you have the opportunity of having the summary, for example, on the board, you say, oh my God, so in the last year, I've gained 7 extra people. What are these 7 extra people doing? Have I opened a new department? So that's when you start asking the questions. The great thing about Insights is it gives you the data to be able to ask the right questions. Because this is what our job is as HR function. It's not just to present the data, but it is to pose the question. That's the first. The second would be the attrition rate or the turnover rate. The turnover rate, there is always a need for a turnover rate. I call it fresh water. You always need a certain healthy turnover rate. In different industries, the turnover rate will be different. In fact, we're moving towards a system where you will be able to see the turnover rate when compared to the national benchmark and also to the benchmark in the industry. That's where we want to get to. Slow and steady, we will get there, and it will be a feature eventually on the platform. But already you can use it for your turnover rate and to see the trends over 3 years. And if you want then to backdate, the data is available. But on the screen, you'll see it for 3 years. How has my turnover rate changed? Now, we can't blame COVID any longer. right? So what's happening to our turnover rate? Has there been a spike? What are the months? So this, when you look at the turnover dashboard on Insights, you can see where have we seen the spikes of turnover, which months, which departments, and which areas are we struggling with the most, and which manager, more importantly. There's a famous, I think it's Peter Drucker that says, he's a management consultant, people do not leave organizations, they leave managers. And he's never been righter than that. People don't leave organizations, they leave managers. If you're not happy with your manager, then people will leave. Now think about the costs of vacancy announcement, recruitment, in terms of time and money. Recruitment agency fees, onboarding fees, people with fresh packs, whatever you need to do when it comes to insurance, cancelling insurance, all the training that you've lost and all the training. If you put that all together, and I honestly wish that there is a formula, I'm still searching for it, for us to put it on the platform, as to how much losing staff and attrition rate costs to the company. Then we will look after our employees a little bit more and invest in them a little bit more. So this is really, the attrition rate will give you a lot of information. What's happening? What is happening? Is it the manager? Is it the department? Is it our culture? Now, of course, we need to be a bit courageous because we will ask the questions, but the answers are not always very comfortable. And so this is where the courage comes in. This is why we organized a few months ago a course called Flourishing in HR, because it is a very stressful place to be, because you know what's happening in your organizations. I very rarely have met HR function people that do not know what's going on in the organization, that don't feel it, that don't understand that there are issues. They will say, we have a toxic manager there, we have a toxic CEO, we have problems over here in our culture. We get it, and this is why we recognize the fact that HR needs to be supported 100% to be able to, one, protect yourselves and also look after yourselves and make progress slow and steady as it comes. Not like me, like this explosion overnight that I used to do, because that does not work. It works against you in the long run. But a slow and steady progression where you see a vision for 3 to 5 years. And then you say, look, this is where I want to get to. And then as the department gains trust, you will see that you will gain gravitas in the organization and your words will become more weighted. There was never a time in Malta where HR departments were more respected than in COVID, because that's exactly most of the information needed to be able to function came from the HR. And they realized how hard the HR functions work. So I have a huge respect for the challenges that you face every single day. And this is the issue. So let's look at the system to be able to understand. If we're going to be looking at onboarding, let's understand how we're going to develop our brand. People that are being onboarded will decide whether they want to stay in your organization in the first 50 days. Those are crucial days. How are we going to work that through? With onboarding lists, making sure that people have maybe buddies. Now they could be even an artificial intelligence buddy, where people ask, I think one of the organizations I worked in, I didn't know how to buy food. We were in the middle of an industrial zone and I had no clue how to buy my lunch. I didn't want to bring food with me every single day. Nobody told me that people organized lunches and, collections to buy lunch every day. So for the first 2 days, I had no lunch. Third day, I got my lunch. And then eventually I got to know the system. So in a sense, how do you make sure that your people feel at home and feel safe and not completely lost? With onboarding lists, making sure that you know the anxiety that they're feeling at the time.
And we mentioned analytics, and you touched upon different types of analytics. So from leave to understand, because obviously there's a cost with that leave carried forward as well. The hourly rate of the employee might change from one year to another if there's any salary increment.
Yes.
To sick leave, seeing if there's any kind of abuse, any patterns with a particular person taking sick leave on certain days, which can also help you plan your resources. For example, companies working on Saturday.
You mentioned sick leave. What's interesting about Insights is every company we go into and demo Insights, we look at the new trends in Malta. So when I was younger, Monday and Friday were the sick leave days. Everyone used to take Monday and Friday, a longer weekend. But now, the people have caught up. Now they take a weekend midweek. So now when you look at the companies, Wednesday and Thursday, or let's take a midweek break. So you see the patterns. You see, for example, if you employ lots of third country nationals, you will see the patterns of sick leave. You will say, okay, so the Filipino community tends to take it on this day. The Indian community tends to take it on this day. Pakistani community on this day. The Maltese on this day. You could see a trend. In Insights, you could also see a trend to say which are the nationalities that are giving my industry the best. Like the longest retention rates, for example. So that gives you insight. And if you go to a board and you say, look, we've been employing from this country, but actually what we've found is that from this country, they're more reliable, so they're going to cost us much less in the long term, then you can make a case. You can make a really, really strong case. And it's a lot of fun when you get used to it. When you understand what you need to look for, you have a lot of fun doing it. Today, what we've done also is we've added ESG. So everyone is panicking about ESG. It's really painful. Why? Again, garbage in, garbage out. You don't know whether your data is correct. Then it's very difficult to calculate it. I used to struggle to issue female-male, especially for International Day of International Women's Day. You say, how many women have I got in my organization? And it takes me an hour to calculate. Whereas this, you just click and they're there. And you know which nationalities they are. You know everything about them. The interesting thing about nationalities is also like one thing in one of the companies I worked with that I was quite like in a sense surprised, I guess, by myself was, different nationalities indicating different religious feasts. And therefore, especially, for example, in Ramadan, are your members of staff out on the road in the sun? And these are duty of care is extremely, extremely important. And we cannot assume that everyone has the same culture as us and has the same traditions as us in Malta. So these are aspects that you'll be able to look at the DNA of your company from Insights and understand, okay, I need to anticipate this. I know that Ramadan is coming up, for example, and I need to anticipate. Sometimes, I think a few years back, Ramadan was exactly in the month of August. And during the day, they practicing
fasting.
They fast without water. So this is extremely important for HR as a caring part of the organization to be able to look at these things. If you're able to anticipate them, then it's very important. We're coming up to Christmas, for example. Christmas, for people that have the Christmas tradition and celebrate Christmas, is a very, very lonely time. So how many people celebrate Christmas in your organization? Are you going to work to bring the organization together to actually organize something on Christmas Day so they won't be alone at home? And this really makes a very big difference to your culture. The Insights are able to give you this information and give you the opportunity to go a little bit extra to be able to give them something a little bit more.
And I think going beyond that as well, so we have a number of dashboards, right, in analytics, and you can focus on different areas, is actually triangulating and observing all of those together to get a bigger picture. So yes, you can see that you have turnover in a particular department. You can see they're not taking leave. Mm-hmm. You can see they're taking a lot of sick leave instead. And you can use that to trigger a discussion about why that is. Is it a toxic team member, a toxic manager, work overload, they need to grow the team. So I think it goes beyond just individual dashboards, but being able to look at them in a holistic perspective. But we were at another workshop last week as well, and there was a Maltese academic present, and he mentioned basically a study that he performed with some other academics in Germany and Poland, where they were actually looking into why analytics haven't been adopted more by HR professionals. And the key finding in Malta was about people not feeling confident enough in the analytics or haven't been trained properly in understanding those analytics to be able to make a good enough argument, a strong enough argument, which maybe you can touch upon what we're doing here, because our aim is to go beyond the software we provide to help HR departments take their status up to the next level. Maybe you can kind of dive in a bit there.
So for us, what has always been very, very important is looking at software. I'm not a software person. I'm the furthest from a software person. I understand absolutely nothing in software. This great admiration for people that have the patience to code and to bring these softwares to life. But what I do know is that I'm a user, and I'm a very avid user, and I know exactly what I like and what I don't. And very often we sit down, Bex and I, with the developers and banter as to what they think is possible and what we think we need as HR professionals. And we do need, and one of the things I always felt very strongly about was the need to give me a tool to make me more believable. That was one of my biggest stresses in HR was I'm not believable enough. When I walk in very emotionally and say we have a problem in this area, I'm not believable enough. So analytics has given me a world of opportunity. I didn't understand it all. And so this is where we are going to be working with the Shireburn Academy to bring you not just analytics, but also an understanding of analytics and how you can use analytics and present analytics to an audience that you require to listen to you and then take action on. And start building to a strategic function of HR. So this is really where we want to go. Funnily enough, the easiest route is to convince them that we have a dashboard on ESG, because all of a sudden everybody understands ESG. Everybody understands that legally you have to report on ESG, and all the HR, or most of the majority of the HR analytics that you need are on the ESG dashboard now that you can just plug and play. So you click and it's all there in the exact format that is needed. And so, it's very, very easy. But also with the same reasoning, you can, for example, if I were running an HR department today, I would say, okay, so I have the analytics platform, insights, and I'm going to be looking at once every quarter presenting these key insights to the board. These are what I would consider the KPIs of HR and the health of the company. We'll start from attrition rate, leave, cost of leave at the moment, etc. It also goes into forecasting. It goes into cost of percentage increase, decrease, etc. So there's quite a lot to actually look at. And then after that, ask my team and instruct my team to become pros on analyzing data in different areas. Sit them down and say, okay, so this month we're going to be looking specifically at sick leave. Let's look at trends. I had an individual, for example, that every month used to take 2 days of sick leave. She would be on the Bradford factor, which is also there. She would be very, very, very high on the Bradford factor, which is a formula that we use to indicate possible abuse of leave. And all of a sudden I had a random conversation with her, realized she gets extremely bad periods once a month and therefore takes 2 days of sick leave, which is very normal, and very acceptable. So that was not an issue. I then floored it as an issue. That was sidelined. In some cases, you have other people who consider sick leave to be part of their leave. And you can see a trend that they take it every single month. So then you question. And then you say, what do I do? I'm going to stop sick leave. No, you can't, because it's illegal. But what you can do is you can work with good doctors, and there are some very, very, very good doctors that can identify abusers relatively quickly, and you start working with doctors and have a policy and create a policy to send doctors to the people that you feel. But instead of sending doctors to everyone, because that could also be offensive, then you can send doctors to the people that have been identified by insights on your platform that are in the red zone. And the people that are most likely to be abusing, and then you can eliminate as such. So this is what it gives you. It gives you the opportunity to ask the right questions and take the right decisions with the right data. That's really what it does.
Exactly. So as Mikela mentioned, something we are setting up at the moment, it should be launched early next year, is the Shireburn Academy, where we're going to have a number of courses which go beyond. We already provide a lot of training, as most of you will know, on our platform, but this will be beyond the platform and actually how to utilize it to make the HR department's life easier, how to train new hiring managers, for example. I mean, I came from a very different background and suddenly found myself in a manager position. It can be very difficult to make your own way in how to deal with issues within the team, how to reward properly in the team, how to give the right questions in an interview, and having that type of knowledge as an HR department to be able to mentor maybe those new managers as well into that role will be key as well. So basically, I think we've discussed everything that we had to discuss today. Mikela, do you have anything else you want to add?
Just that I have a huge admiration for people in HR. This is not an industry that I ever thought I would move into, not after diplomacy, that's for sure, but it's one that I have learned to appreciate and love, also because you're dealing with people that are the drivers of any organization, and people will have different skills. And how capable are we as HR functions to be able to identify the skill set and the need of the organization and match the two? That takes time, it takes a lot of skill, and it takes a lot of gut instinct. And then so my advice is also trust your gut instinct. Really trust your gut instinct, and then use the systems to be able to give you information that will validate what you're thinking and what you're feeling, to be able to give you a platform to convince. So this is really what it's all about. And there is a lot we can do for ourselves on behalf of HR to be able to build happier workplaces as an HR function, rather than to wait for other people to instruct us to do so. So thank you very much. Happy Christmas.
Thank you. Happy Christmas. And we look forward to hosting more of these in the future.
We do.
Thank you.
Thank you, and take care.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.